We have about one more minute until we get started. So I'm just kind of letting you know where we are and we'll go from there. Okay, it is 5:30. Let's go ahead and get started. This is the Graphic Arts Technology Program kind of information session. If you have questions as I go through the presentation, feel free to throw them out there. I'm not going to be upset about it. I'm more used to being peppered by questions when I'm working with students, so it's not a big deal for me. I'll start off by introducing myself, but we're going to do that in a moment anyway. My name is Christopher Legal. I'm one of the faculty in the Graphic Arts Technology Program. And the other faculty member here, Pat Cheek, you'll see him with the yellow and black shirt in the background. But let's go ahead and get started. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the program. We're going to talk a little bit about admissions. I don't know if there's any admissions staff here who can talk a little bit more about that. We'll see when we get into it. We'll talk about the faculty. We'll talk about how our program is delivered. We'll talk about the costs, curriculum, activities. We'll talk about high school students. That's called concurrent enrollment for those who don't know. We'll talk about transfer opportunities. And then at the end, we'll have a question and answer session for anything that we didn't manage to get to. So let's go ahead and get started. The Graphic Arts Technology Program, it is a 2-year arts applied AAS program. We actually have a 1-year diploma option for students who just want to kind of get in and get their feet wet and then move on into industry. We also currently have a certificate in photography. And then for those students who are in high school, we have a high school career academy, which means that students who are in high school can begin taking classes with us and then while they're in high school and get credit for them while they're in high school and release time while they're in high school. And then after they graduate, the expectation is that they would finish up with us upon graduation from high school. So as far as admissions go, we do have a program advisor. Matt Endress is our advisor, and he's great. I don't see him listed here. Let me just see. No, I don't. But he would be the first person to talk to outside of the program faculty about any questions you may have related to how do you enroll, what sort of paperwork do you have to fill out, any information you might have or questions you might have about financial aid. He would be the best person to start with in that regard. As far as the program faculty go, this is a fun picture of a couple of us faculty at graduation a couple of years ago. This is Pat Cheek. He's the other faculty member here joining us on the call or on the Zoom. And then this is me when I had a little bit more hair and a little bit more color in my hair. My name is Christopher Legal. I am a faculty member in the Graphic Arts Technology Program. I've been teaching at CCC at Eastern Iowa Community Colleges for more than 20 years. My father graduated from Eastern Iowa Community Colleges. My daughter and son have graduated from Eastern Iowa Community Colleges. I have a daughter who's currently enrolled here. So I have a long history, not only with the program, but with the school itself. I worked in industry for about a decade before I moved into teaching. I worked for Newell Rubbermaid. It's actually changed the name. It got bought out by a company, it's Jardin, but it's the company that makes everything from Sharpie markers to Graco car seats and things like that. I worked for one of their divisions up in Madison. And in addition to that, I also freelanced for a long time, or actually I still freelance on the side. I worked as a concert photographer out in Phoenix, shooting all the heavy metal and rock and roll and grunge bands that came through Phoenix in the early 90s. And I started my first graphic design business when I was 16, still in high school. So I've really had an interest in this. And that's a little bit about my background. Pat, you want to talk a little bit about your background then?
Sure. My name's Pat Cheek. I was self-employed as a graphic designer for about 25 years, and then I started uh, changed careers and started teaching. And I've been at Clinton Community College this is my 17th year. Chris and I have worked together for all those years. And, my youngest son is a graduate of Eastern Iowa Community Colleges, and we're happy that you're here to talk to us this evening.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Some things about our program. Our program is fully online. That means that we do not actually meet either online as a group or in a classroom. All of our classes are taught through a learning management system. We use Canvas in particular. So that means all of our lectures, all of the reading assignments, all the videos, all the actual discussion board topics and projects and everything else, all of those are online. And what that means is that students who are working full-time or who have other obligations have a lot more flexibility in terms of when they can get the work done. You don't have to be in a classroom at a certain time on a certain day to meet with either Pat or myself, or both in some cases where we co-teach classes. But the flip side of that is, if you do need to reach us, Pat and I've found that I'm probably meeting more one-on-one with students than I have ever in the past, because I don't have classroom times to meet set aside in my day. I have a little bit more flexibility in my schedule to Zoom with students or respond to emails and those sorts of things. So our program is fully online, and I see that as being the way we're going to continue with this for the foreseeable future. As far as costs go, just like any college program, there are books and I don't know if I'd say lab fees. Right now, up until this point, we use LinkedIn Learning for a lot of the lectures instead of textbooks for a lot of our classes. And the main reason for that is one of the problems that we've had with our program, because we teach software like Photoshop and InDesign and Illustrator and things like that, is by the time a textbook gets written and published and into a student's hands, it's usually about 18 months old. And there's a little bit of a lag in terms of what is in a textbook versus what the software actually looks like, or in terms of how it's functioning. The nice thing about LinkedIn Learning, and Pat and I have both used LinkedIn Learning and its predecessor, lynda.com, for more than 2 decades as an instructional supplement for our program. The nice thing about it, LinkedIn Learning, is that as the software evolves, they can just go in and record new videos for those things that get changed and leave alone the things that don't get changed. And so it's actually been really good for us in that it's always been current as far as my experience goes. Sometimes it's a little bit too current because they cycle out some of the older things, and so Pat and I have to stay on our toes in terms of keeping our references current within our classroom, but that's actually a good thing, so I'm not overly upset. Now, because LinkedIn Learning is such an integral part of our program, normally there is a cost for people to use it. However, because of the pandemic and for a couple of other reasons, the college has been picking up that cost. So I would call that a lab fee that's been waived. Now, there has been a lot of conversation about LinkedIn Learning in terms of how we're going to handle that going forward. And we just got emails within the last couple of weeks saying that the district has finally decided to buy a site license for it on a provisional trial basis. So the expectation for at least the foreseeable future is the college will continue to pick up the cost of that software. Now, the nice thing about that is historically, I've always tried to keep the cost of the textbooks for my classes down to $100 or less. If you look at the cost of buying textbooks for 2 years for 5 to 7 classes per semester, that's actually a pretty big cost savings. And so One of the other things that we do require for students to have in the program is you have to have your own computer that is capable and has the Adobe Creative Cloud software on it. It's capable of running that software. So what we've done is we've basically migrated those costs of buying textbooks into the students actually now having their own computer that they can use at home, and the software that goes along with our program, and that is the industry standard software that's used in our discipline. There are a couple of classes that still have textbook requirements. I've got a few listed here: color theory, color correction, issues in graphic arts, and then your gen ed classes like psychology or English comp. We don't have any control of those because those are taught outside of our program. So those classes may have textbooks that you have to purchase as well. But overall, I've done the math. It's actually less expensive for students now, even with the purchase of their own computer and software, than it has been in the past when we had a full computer lab with the software and students had to buy their own textbooks. So I think this has actually been a net positive for us in a lot of different ways that I discussed before. In addition to the textbooks the computer and software costs, some classes may have additional costs that I'm just kind of giving you a heads up on. And you'll have to look at the syllabus for each of those classes to see what they are. Generally, they're not very expensive. For instance, I teach the web development courses. I have students actually buy or contract with a web hosting company. The costs for those are pretty manageable, and I'm still able to keep the cost of a class under $100 in additional outside costs. So I'm pretty happy with that. The Adobe Creative Cloud software, there is a student discount. So if you are thinking about coming into our program, don't just go out and pay for the professional version. When you get closer to enrolling into our program, that is when I would encourage you to reach out to us. Pat and I actually send out an email at the beginning of the semester and the beginning of the school year with links to that software to help students know where to purchase it and how to set it up. It does mean you need to have a credit card because you have to purchase it directly from from Adobe now. But like I said, there are reduced costs for students. And then some classes may have additional utilities and plugins. And again, you'll just have to look at the syllabus to know what those are. Likewise, for the hardware, as I said before, you do need to purchase your own computer for the program. And one of the things that I've seen happen since I started teaching is students get really excited about coming into our program. And I totally get it. I understand that. But my recommendation is to hold off on buying a computer or a desktop computer or a laptop until you're ready to start the program. That means that usually you should wait until about late summer to purchase that kind of equipment. And there's a couple of reasons for it. One is that if you buy a computer, let's say you're planning on starting with us this August and you got your grandparents decide to buy you a laptop or something like that for Christmas, by the time you start in our program, that laptop is going to be 8 months old. And there is a shelf life to computers. I mean, one of the reasons why we hold off on putting out computer specifications for our program until, excuse me, right before the semester starts is as those computer requirements change and get more intense because the Adobe software that we use, you may find that really great deal on the laptop that you got in December isn't quite serving your needs a year and a half into the program, when that computer or laptop you're working with now is 2 or more years old. So our recommendation is to hold off until right before you start the program to buy a computer or laptop. And then the other thing is too, there's a lot of good deals on back to school laptops and computers. So Christmas is unfortunately one of the worst times to buy that kind of equipment. And so there's a lot of good reasons on holding off. If you already have one or you have access to one, great, don't panic about it. But if you are looking at making that purchase, again, I recommend that you hold off on picking up that equipment until you're closer to starting the program. Printing costs, again, there may be some printing costs associated with the program. Right now, we are working with some entities within the college to pick up some of those costs, and we'll continue to monitor that. But like I said, you may have some printing costs going forward as you move through the program, as you would expect in a graphic arts program in general. In terms of the curriculum, the first semester, it looks intense. It's got 7 classes, but one of the things to pay attention to is that the computer literacy course is only runs for 4 weeks, and then the last 12 weeks of the semester is when the color theory class runs. And so it's like a one in terms of time slots, which is still the way I think about it because I taught on campus for so long. It's like one class that just kind of changes topics after about the first month then. But in that first semester, we put you into 2D design. We make sure that you know how to use a computer, and please don't get too upset about that. We have over the years found that students think they know more than they do about how to use computers. And more importantly, we train you how to use computers in the context of working as a graphic designer or graphic artist. So that's the intent of that, to just make sure everyone has the same foundation as they go through the program or as they move into the program, to make sure that there aren't any gaps in your knowledge and you're struggling with how to install fonts or do that kind of thing. We put you in Illustrator, we put you in Photoshop. In other words, this is the semester when you really learn how to work with images in the context of the graphic arts discipline. Pat teaches the Intro to Graphic Arts Technology course. It's an introduction to our industry, and there's a lot of great information in there. And then we also have a math class. Every program in the state of Iowa is required to have a math class, and that one is ours. The Calculations and Measurements course for the graphic arts. It's an applied math course. Basically, it's addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, fractions, decimals. Really. There isn't any algebra in it. That's kind of as high as it goes. It's basic order of or basic operations. In the second semester, that's when we start getting to how do you use those images in more of a layout kind of environment. So in addition to the gen eds that you see there, the art appreciation, the drawing or music appreciation, those are, or you only have to take one of those. We have a typography course, and we have that running after the Illustrator course because it's a lot of overlap. If you know how to use Illustrator, it makes the typography course easier to handle. Likewise, Pat teaches the typography and InDesign course. That's where you just lay out all sorts of print-related documents, everything from newsletters to letterhead and envelopes and those sorts of things, posters, etc., and so on. Color correction is an advanced Photoshop class where you're actually taking an image and making it or polishing it so it looks great in whatever context you're using it. And then the Intro to HTML and CSS class. Nowadays, employers expect you to have some basic web skills, and that's the introductory course that goes along with that. In term 3, that's when we have you take the English comp class. Again, we have some gen ed requirements that the state requires that our students have. You take an advanced InDesign course, which is an advanced print projects kind of course. That's where you start working with multi-page document types of projects. Packaging design is where you actually design packages. I mean, pretty much everything nowadays is packaged in some way, cartons and things like that. Issues in graphic arts technology is all about copyright contracts and things like that. Content management systems is an advanced web class. Social media branding, likewise, is for related to social media and how do you create marketing materials for those kinds of environments. And then in the last semester, we have a project management course. We have our portfolio course where you actually finish putting together your portfolio for graduating from the program. Tech changes. Again, that's a course to make sure that you've got everything ready to go for after you graduate in terms of interviewing skills. Your resume is all up to speed and that sort of stuff. We have an internship course that may change in the future, but right now it's part of our program. And then you have another gen ed requirement of psych or soc. So that's our curriculum. Pat, you want to say anything about those courses? I know I kind of went through it quickly.
Well, no, that's, yeah, you said, I think you said enough about them. I just, wanted to say that about the computers, Chromebooks or iPads aren't going to work as far as the computers go. You're going to need to have, $1,000 plus computer, $1,100, $1,200, $1,000 to $1,200. So if The other ones just aren't powerful enough.
Right.
And then the software for the Adobe Creative Cloud is only $20 a month for students. So it's really not bad, but you need to have a good computer, a professional type computer.
Sure, sure. I see there's a question here. Do you know if it matters if not? You that's a good question. If you're a transfer student and you've taken some of these Gen Ed courses, work with the registrar, or we'll work with the registrar to see if we can transfer those in. We're not interested in making you retake psychology or English comp. Excuse me, my throat is drying out. So if you've taken those classes elsewhere, chances are they'll probably transfer. I can't say for sure because the registrar makes that final call, but that is something we've had a number of students over the years do. They've started somewhere else, or they already have a degree. They want to learn additional skills with us, and we try to work with them and get as many of those classes that they've taken already and apply to our program so they can get what they need as quickly as possible. Does that answer your question, Katie? Okay, good. Also, we have students participate in a couple of different competitions. Because of the pandemic, some of these things kind of were put on hiatus, but it looks like they're starting back up again. The ICADI is the Iowa Community College Advertising and Design Invitational, I think it is. And that's actually a competition among the community colleges in the state of Iowa that Pat and I co-founded. That's back up and going now. It's really nice to see how your work compares to students at other community colleges around the state. And then also there's the ADDIE Awards. The American Advertising Federation is a trade group that works in, it's an industry trade group. And every year they have a competition of work done both by students and professionals. And we've had our students compete in those forever. And one of the fun things about that is, in that case, we're competing against students. Our students are competing against students at not just community colleges, but also the four-year and Regents universities within the regions. So that's everything from Western University to the University of Iowa to Kirkwood and so on and so forth. And in our experience, we smoke them. I mean, our students do such a great job. We've been very successful with the way that our program stacks up against some of the other programs within our region. So we've been very happy with that. Concurrent enrollment, as I said before, we do have a career academy so that high school students can take classes from our program. Pat, you want to talk more about that? I've got some family who just came in. I need to shush.
Oh, sure. So I mean, you could take, I don't know exactly how it works, but there's a counselor at the high schools, but you could take our classes and get credit for them and credit for at the high school also. But you can talk to those counselors there, and you could start our program while you're still in high school, and then finish it up when you graduate. You'd be steps ahead of a lot of the other people there. And I think that has anybody got any questions that we can answer? The first thing, let me just say, the first thing you should do is talk to a counselor like Matt and find out a little bit more about admissions. And admissions is easy, and there's scholarships available. The Last Dollar Scholarship is for Iowa's people that graduated from high school in Iowa can take our program for free. Basically, you won't have to be out of pocket for anything.
Okay, thanks, Pat. Next up, some students do come into our program with the hope to transfer after they graduate for a four-year program. We currently have transfer agreements with the University of Dubuque. University of Northern Iowa has a great program that a lot of our students have transferred to. We do have a transfer agreement with Western Illinois University. They no longer have a comparable program to ours, but a lot of our students have actually gone from our program into a business marketing program that they have there. And that's been a very successful movement for them because they get both the graphic design side, they get the marketing side, and they're positioned quite nicely for when they graduate for moving into the marketplace. We're currently also in conversation with St. Ambrose and Augustana about setting up a transfer agreement. Those aren't done deals yet. So if you're interested in those, talk more to us and I can let you know about those if you have additional questions. But right now, those are not signed yet. So I can't say we have them in place, but we are working on them. We're really excited about those because obviously those are two major universities in our area and we haven't been able to make as much progress as we have recently. So I've got my fingers crossed, but it's not a done deal yet. So just, if you're interested, let us know and we'll talk more with you about it as we have more information. Okay. That's what I have. Does anyone have any questions for us?
There was a question about a Mac Pro. I answered it, about a 10-year-old MacBook Pro, and that's getting kind of old.
Yeah. I think you're probably at the limit of what that computer can handle realistically. Yeah, 10 years is pretty old for a computer, especially given what we do. And again, one of the things to look at is if you have some questions, a good place to start is to take a look at the Adobe Creative Cloud software web pages up on the Adobe site and see what they're, just do a search for minimum recommendations and it'll list out what kind of processor it should have, how much RAM it should have, and those kinds of things. And that should give you a guiding idea or some idea of what you'll need in order to be able to run the Adobe Creative Cloud software successfully. Okay, so the next question is, how much is this going to cost on average? I can only speak to the cost of the hardware and software. If you're asking in terms of tuition and whatnot, I would have to defer to someone from admissions to talk more about that. Do we have anyone from admissions here on the call? Any of our student support people? Yeah. If you want, you can leave your name and I'll have somebody contact you from admissions. But as Pat said earlier, generally, if you're looking to buy a computer that will run the Adobe Creative Cloud software for the next 2 or so years while you're going through the program, the price point has usually been around $1,000 to $1,200, with the caveat being with all the disruptions in the supply chain and logistics, those prices have been a little bit higher than they have lately than they have been usually. But again, remember, most of our classes don't have textbooks. So if you look at how much you would have spent on textbooks over the course of the 2 years that you're in the program, you would have spent more than that on buying textbooks or even renting textbooks. Likewise, with the software, Pat said right now Adobe is offering it for students at a student discount of about $20 a month. And this is one of the things that we really ground out when we were talking about making the transition to fully online. If you add up the cost of a computer and the software and what it would have cost you over those 2 years versus buying or renting textbooks, it's still cheaper to go to our program now than it was 5 or 6 years ago. So just because of that textbook cost. I mean, textbook costs are crazy expensive, and I think most people are aware of that. So we're really happy with the fact that we've been able to move the program online. We've been able to make it more accessible to students who wouldn't otherwise be able to go in the past. And the cost is actually less than it would have been if we still continue to have a face-to-face program. So, Micah, does that answer your question? Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Sure, no problem.
Let's just say if you didn't have a scholarship at all and you were paying out of pocket, it would be around $9,000 for tuition for 2 years. But most students have some sort of a scholarship, or a lot of students have the last dollar scholarship where it doesn't cost them anything. you know, I mean, you'd have to still have to have the software in your computer, but all the tuition and fee costs are covered by that.
Right, right. And another thing to think about too is community colleges have a lot of grants, a lot of scholarships, that I would certainly encourage you to take a look at before you think too much about the cost. Or compared to a lot of our region schools, we're already cheaper. But on top of that, we have grants and scholarships. We have the Last Dollar Scholarship. A lot of our students go for free, just because they are able to cover the costs using those kinds of funding sources. So when does the next session start in this fall? Classes usually start around mid-August. So I don't know, usually like the third week of August is when we get up and going.
I have a question I'm gonna ask verbally if that's okay.
Oh, please do, please do.
So for next steps, would you recommend meeting with like an advisor or counselor first, or filling out paperwork for like those grants and things first?
I if you feel comfortable doing the paperwork yourself, I mean, feel free to do so. I do believe at some point you do need to talk to an advisor of some kind. And so I would encourage you to at least touch base with them. Give them a call, send them an email saying, hey, I'm starting the program this fall. What are the next steps? And they'll walk you through it. I don't want to say the wrong thing. What?
They know the deadlines too. You know, the
That's the other
deadlines
thing, yeah.
for the FAFSA and all that. We don't really know that. And so the admissions people can tell you all that. I would talk to admissions people, find out exactly what you have to do.
Right, right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mhm.
And I don't want to put any pressure on anyone, but since we moved online, our enrollment quadrupled. So we've actually had to open multiple sections of some classes and whatnot. And classes have been filling up very quickly. So if you are interested in joining us this fall and enrolling in the program, I would encourage you to get started on that paperwork as soon as possible. We are moving to probably having wait lists given how high the demand has been for our program. So I would certainly want everyone to get in who possibly can, but at this point in time, there are only 2 faculty in the program and we only have so many hours in the day. So does anyone else have any questions? Okay. Well, that's all I have. We blocked out an hour, but we've actually only used about a half hour of that time. So if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to ask them now or write them in the chat. If you'd like to email either of us, I'm going to go ahead and put our email addresses in the chat too. So you can check us out that way. And it's been a pleasure speaking with everyone. Yeah. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hope to see some of you in the fall.
Yep, we do.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Sure
much.
thing, no problem.
Jane, do you have any more questions for us or? I'm going to stop the recording.